Thank you for listening to Scandinavian Crimes Podcast. Be sure to check out the episode links and be part of our other social media platforms where you can leave a topic suggestion or even share some of your insights regarding the subject matter of the episode. We will always do our best to provide a well-researched episode, but sometimes due to limited access to information and translation issues, some information can be lost. It is therefore good to do your own research and get a deeper understanding of a case of your own interest. So with that all said, let us start today's episode.
Welcome to another Scandinavian Crimes Podcast. My name is Devante, and say hello to my lovely co-host, Delila.
Hi.
And on this podcast, we will cover your famous Scandinavian criminals who made their mark throughout Scandinavian history. So today we're covering some really crazy stuff, but above all, I hope the holidays have been great. I hope you were safe. I hope you took my advice and did not drink and drive, because trust me, that kills millions of people a year across the globe. So I hope you were responsible as we talk about today's case. Now, ultimately, this case in particular is very, very crazy and very intense, and there's a lot of information about this, and there is a very huge potential that we're probably just going to simply do a part 2 to it because there is a lot of information. But I'll try and jam pack as much as I can into this episode, but ultimately there is just a ton of episode information for this one. But all of this took place during the evening of July 31st, 2000. So even though 2000 for me and a lot of people who are my age feels like it was literally yesterday, I forget this is literally 23 years ago. So it's about when two girls who were at a local playground in Baneheia in the area of Kristiansand, they were eventually lured to a nearby wooded area where they were subjugated and prolonged to a series of brutal attacks. The girls were beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death. And just so everyone is clear, at least when we get deeper into the story, just so you have a point of reference, there is going to be to Kristiansand, by the way, the area of Kristiansand, and there's actually going to be a person by the name of Kristiansand. So there's going to be a little bit of a, back and forth, and just wanted to make sure you guys understood that they are two different things. So just be aware of the context. But besides all that, this is a story of the Baneheia Murders. On the evening of the murders, Sophie Sorstrinen and Lena Paulson were due to go swimming at a lake called Stramp 3, which was located in the recreational area of Baneheia, close to where both of their fathers lived. Sophie was visiting Grimstad, while Lena had come from another neighborhood in Kristiansand. When they did not return home by 11, their parents notified the police, who launched a major search operation with canine units. This was quickly bolstered by over 50 volunteers from the Norwegian Red Cross and soon increased further with the help from Sea King helicopters, rescue divers, and civilian divers who searched lakes and ponds within the area. Mountaineers also climbed steep cliffs near Baneheia, with firefighters assessing shorelines. On Saturday night, 16 electronic listening posts were installed around the terrain with the purpose of detecting any faint noise, and those noises would include things like crying or groaning, so that way they could pinpoint where it was coming from based on region, just in case they'd been hurt or lying somewhere in the hills. On the second day of their disappearance, the police increased their search to include the woodlands and lake near Kristiansand, known together as Baneheia. And forgive me if I'm butchering these names, I'm just trying to pronunciate them as best as I can as an American. Hundreds of home guard troops were sent to look for the missing kids, examining gardens, garages, boats, sheds, hedges, and kindergartens. The police also used helicopters and had heat-seeking cameras attached. All tunnels related to the roadwork in Baneheia were examined, and buses, ferries, trains, and taxis were all checked by officers with guns. However, they found no hint of where the children had gone. After 2 days had passed, the police announced the discovery of a human skeleton by the Odda River close to Egg Hospital. Initially, they believed it was the missing German tourist with no connection to the case at hand, but then it was determined that it was a former psychiatric patient who had run away from the nearby hospital years before. Later in the day, at around 5:03 p.m., Bloodstained clothes were found concealed beneath a layer of mosses located 50 meters west of Lake Steppe. The police, together with the military personnel of Home Guard, immediately moved in to cordon off the area. Later that evening at approximately 20:37, and for all of you Americans who are listening to this story who aren't familiar with what we call military time, 20:37 is deemed 4 hours from midnight, which indicates it's simply 8:37. Police announced the confirmation that both girls had been found murdered at that site. Upon receiving the news, the reaction among the hundreds of search and rescue personnel on site was one of enormous grief, with many breaking down and weeping inconsolably, and others walking around in a state of shock. The bodies of the two little girls were found hidden under pine branches in a small slab rock crack a few dozen meters west of the pond, which is one of the several ponds that constitutes a much frequented bathing area for the populace in Kristiansand. Traces of blood were also found across the scene along with the girls' clothes and shoes. They had been sexually assaulted, tied up, strangled, and stabbed to death. During the early investigations after the discovery of the bodies, the police opened a murder investigation. Despite having received about 150 tips in this case, they were practically without leads. Kristiansand police, however, stated that they were optimistic and confident that in this case we will be able to resolve it fairly quickly. Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg and the Minister of Justice Han Harlem both stated that everything would be done to get these murders solved. On a normal Friday night, there tended to be around 200 people jogging and strolling around in Baneheia. On the night of the crime, approximately 100 people were either jogging or walking through the area, a fixed abode for recreational drug users that for years had been colloquially referred to as Acid Peak was only 200 meters from the place where two little girls were found murdered. Police interviewed large numbers of individuals known to frequent the area in order to learn of any possible witnesses. The area was also formerly known as a place where exhibitionists and voyeurs operated. Other possible suspects that were questioned by police included former sex offenders, local convicted rapists, convicted murderers, and even two psychiatric patients who had escaped from the psychiatric institution adjacent to the area. Similar crimes, such as the murder of the 13-year-old girl in Sweden, were matched along with the brutal rape of the two girls in Oslo in the case of an eventual serial offender. Even cases of child murders in England were re-examined specifically due to these circumstances. Friends of the victims told police investigators that the two girls had previously experienced a mysterious man following them during a swimming trip. Police initially theorized that the same man was the murderer. The acting chief of Criminal Investigation Service, Kripos, and forgive me if I butcher this, Hakon Skulstad, stated that the worst case scenario was a traveling perpetrator who was just passing through the area, just as Norway had experienced many years earlier in this case of Thomas Quick, was simply just that, a person who was traveling by. However, professor and leading forensic psychiatrist Berthold Grunfeld stated that this was very unlikely. According to him, the murderer was most likely a man in his 30s and without a prior criminal record. This was echoed by expert forensic psychiatrist Kjell Norek, who added that the perpetrator most likely was without any serious mental illness and was aware of his actions in its entirety. In May 2000, the local police said that the main theory was that there was most likely facing two perpetrators who had meticulously planned the murders in advance due to the difficulties a single perpetrator would face in controlling both girls. As he attacked one, the other would have the opportunity to escape. In Baneheia, people were always close by and there were plenty of hiding places among the pine thickets and rock. The odds were good that a lone assailant would fail. In June of that same year, Kripos composed a profile for the killer, and their theory was that there were only one perpetrator. The police were also searching for 5 unidentified people who behaved suspiciously near Baneheia. So after a few months of investigation, the police finally made an arrest. Now, this arrest was compiled based on the profile, but only lightly based off of that, but also checking DNA based on the scene, as well as a few leads that they followed up on. After a few months of investigation, the local police wanted to arrest both a man called Anderson and Kristiansand And like I mentioned earlier, Kristiansand is the person, but they were stopped by Kripos. And for those of you who've forgotten already, Kripos is just the criminal investigation service who was helping assist the police when it came to this case. The reason for stopping the arrest was that there was no evidence on either Anderson or Kristiansand at the time. Afterward, when checking the DNA found on the crime scene, there was a match for Anderson. On September 13th, after keeping him under surveillance for 48 hours, they arrested the 19-year-old Jan Helge Anderson and charged him with the double murder. According to the police, though, Anderson's DNA was a perfect match with pubic hairs found on the scene. He had no criminal record. Kristiansand was also arrested at the same time as Anderson, although they still didn't have any evidence of Kristiansand even being at the scene at that time. Upon his arrest, Anderson initially denied having anything to do with the murders, even when confronted with DNA evidence. Moments later, when the lead interrogator, Geir Hansen, suggested that Anderson himself could be a victim in the case, that Viggo Kristiansand could have been the most active participant, Anderson admitted that he murdered one of the girls. He also named 21-year-old Viggo Kristiansand as the murderer of the other girl. The two suspects were close friends and had been seen by witnesses in Baneheia on the day of the murders. Anderson explained that the two men had plotted to commit rape and murder in detail for quite some time and had bicycled around in Baneheia on the day of murder looking for random victims when they spotted two girls swimming. After luring the girls into the woods by claiming to have kittens, Anderson said that he acted as a lookout while Kristiansand raped the two girls and that he was forced to kill Slagdel Paulsen after fearing she would scream. Kristiansand then stabs Soestranen to death when she tried to escape. He said Kristiansand was the dominant one and that it was he who gave the orders, which he felt compelled to follow, as he was intimidated by Kristiansand, according to him. Now, according to Anderson as well, Kristiansand threatened to kill him as well as the girls if he did not comply. Kristiansand, however, denied having anything to do with the murders, and both men were subject to evaluation by court-appointed psychiatrists, and both men were subsequently declared to be legally sane and fit to stand trial. On September 28th, Kristiansand was evacuated to a prison outside the city after an internet-organized vigilante mob started gathering on the street outside of the courthouse. On the same day, Kristiansand Police Commissioner Anston Klev publicly appealed for people to remain calm throughout the city. So I'm actually going to wrap up at least this part here. So this is part 1 of the Baneheia murders. I guess the next episode we will release what happens next, because I covered essentially all up until the actual arrest and pretty much the arraignment. And then now not now, but essentially after this, we're going to be covering we're just going to be covering the trial and some of the details that took place during the trial, because even though we're doing a part 2, there is still a ton of information about this case. In general, this is a very big case, and also having to do with the imprisonment, how they were found guilty, the charges, all that stuff. There's a lot of information, but ultimately there is some stuff that I want to leave for part 2, but for this episode, we will talk about, at least the first half, what we figured out or what we've discovered in this first half regarding, things you should do as a parent, especially when you have 2 little girls. And I hate to say this, now, am I saying all boys, all men are a problem? Absolutely not. No, but there are people who will hurt your children. Unfortunately, we live in a very, very sick and dark world where, people do have these urges and they don't know how to control them. They don't know what to do with them. And unfortunately, they can act on them. And so one thing we're learning about these as well is that a lot of these predatory behaviors do fit a certain demographic of, ethnic, racial, and even regional places in terms of how they target and who they target when it comes to committing crimes of this nature. But I don't know, what do you think, Delila, about this whole situation, at least the first half of the story, knowing this is what happened, how they lured these 2 girls just for the sake of, they had kittens?
Okay, so this was wild, but there's a couple of things that I want to discuss and things that I thought about when I listened to this. And like in the beginning of the story that you told is that they found a skeleton And then they were like on high edge about it. And I was like, what? Why are you guys being so, for a skeleton, they'll only be 3 days. Like, usually the skeleton doesn't have time to decompose. It doesn't like, and usually if the person is like Jeffrey Dahmer and just like acid and stuff, and yeah, I don't know, maybe they found a full skeleton. And then later on I thought about it. I was like, maybe they did that because they wanted to see a correlation, that maybe that skeleton could have anything to do with the victims that is found later on or seen later on. And it did say something about like that it might have been someone who escaped or whatever, but I thought it was weird that they assumed that it had anything to do with it. But I guess they had to be on high alert because, you know, it's kids. And they did do a really good, like, they I don't know too much about Norway in general, but I think that they were very fast with everything. They had like a lot of people joining with the search. They did a really good job. I don't know how big the city is either, but it seems like it's not as big, so it was easier for them to like find the victims. I thought
it was a small town.
Yeah, like, I mean, find the victims, but also find the suspects, or in this case pretty much Anderson. Well, I think that I want to appreciate the work they did, because I thought it was really cool how the experts can tell if it was intentional, and how the abuser was aware, if the abuser had been had any records. Or I love to see detectives just like, and experts just
actually do their jobs.
Yes, I mean, I think it's cool. Okay, I think it's cool how they can be like, you know, see the small things. And I also love that they did a thorough job with looking at previous predators, like, even, you know, for other countries, because they already been through the Thomas Quick one. And I mean, maybe because of Thomas Quick they were maybe they are already really good, I don't know, but I appreciate the work they did, and I thought it was cool to see how they did everything as well, and how they were in high alert all the time. And I'm so sad, you know, I hate to see children go through those things. And this is a sad and tragic story. I you know, it's always hard to listen to these things, but, you know, I think it's important that we spread awareness and education as much as we can, so that people are aware, you know, especially in areas like this where it was like a lot of hiding spots apparently in that specific area. But I'm glad there were people there, you know, jogging, running. So there was not as many. There was like 100 people there, or 50 people who did that regularly during those days. Just about. I think in this case too that unfortunately, even though they still didn't find the girls alive because they pretty much killed them almost immediately, it was a fact that they got results very quickly because they were proactive. They, even when the girls are only missing for a few hours, they weren't like how some cases they say, oh, you have to wait 24 to 48 hours. Yeah, they were fast.
They didn't make them wait. They went and got right on it. They got search parties. They put up, you know, equipment so that way they can detect, you know, certain sounds, low-level sounds, so that way if they were hurt somewhere, they could have found them. They were very proactive very quickly, and they did end up getting, at least from what it seems, they ended up getting the people responsible for the crime within a reasonable time, and the parents and everyone involved was able to get some sort of closure, because the people who did it, they got their crime, they served their time. Well, one of them served their time, one of them is still in jail. Viggo is still in jail, and But Stevenson, I think he was released in 2015, I believe. That it was. Initially, he was supposed to be paroled 2013, but then he got out 2015. So he served his time and has not gotten into any trouble since then, from what I can see, at least not anything major. Viggo is still in prison, so the family got justice, at least, in the legal sense. Obviously, no matter what you do or don't do, you will never get that person back, and it sucks.
Yeah.
Especially, these girls did nothing wrong. It's not like they were somewhere they weren't supposed to be. They were doing what they normally did. They were just being children. And unfortunately, we live in a world where people, no matter what you do or don't do, sometimes things happen. And it seems really unfair, and it really is just sometimes, circumstances by chance, and you run into sick people. And that's why I think, especially in 2023, where everyone is so protective of the children because of the decades of things like this, decades of people floating under the radar and killing people and getting away with it, because there's a lot of unsolved murders from before 2000, plenty of them. So and nowadays people are aware, which is the point of podcasts, news channels that actually have good intentions of informing people. We're a lot more aware, and we understand that yes, the world can be a fun place, but also it can be a very dangerous place. So just keep an eye on your children, your family, check up on people. That's the importance of the importance of stories and podcasts like this, so that way even if the crime rate for your area is low, these are still possibilities. There's still a chance that this can happen. And also, unfortunately, because of recent times as well, violent crimes are on an uptick. Abductions are on an uptick as well. So these are things that, learning from our past, we know the signs, moving forward. So that way we can prevent as many as humanly possible. Because unfortunately, this is the world that we live in. It's sad, depressing, but, we can only inform you so that way you can make the choices you need to live a nice full life into your 80s and hopefully 90s and 100s and stuff like that. So
I also want to say another thing about the story that Anderson said. So you guys know already.
Hey, before we get to that reminds me, by the way, I'm just letting you guys know that there was a slight misnomer of names a little bit. Because I did pull from multiple sources. So pay attention specifically to the last names of both the victims and the two men that were charged. Multiple sources listed them differently. So initially when writing this, one source only had them listed as one way, but then when you go double check information, records, they'll have them listed as something else with a fuller name or maybe a different middle name. So just pay attention specifically to the last names, because the last names was consistent. It's mostly just either a second or the first name that might disappear or change. But just so you know, and it still applies to Stevenson, where they had was it Stevenson Police actually, which was a location, I believe. So that still applies to that one. Like I said that already early in the segment, that still applies, but just so you know, for the victims,
just to make sure that everyone is following through everything.
So you can go ahead with what you were saying. Just wanted to do that before.
Okay. So basically regarding the Anderson story, so a little fast recap. They found the DNA, they couldn't really arrest them or anything because they didn't have no proof, and then they found proof of DNAs from Anderson, like pubic hairs and such, right? And they didn't find nothing on Kristiansand, right? And then Anderson, as soon as he heard that, wait, I can say shit, sorry. But I
mean, you could have. I just would have either bleeped it out, But,
okay, never mind. Okay, so
it's fine.
Anderson was like, oh, wait a minute, you guys have evidence. I don't know, this is in the early 2000s. How do they not know about this? They even discussed in detail how to do this crime. I'm not gonna say the word, how they were gonna do this, and he still was like, oh no, they have proof. And then he says that Kristiansand did most of the crime things and like the harmful things, but they didn't find any evidence. Like if he did all of that, they would find evidence of any sort in that case, because like it's so rare to not to find anything. And they found him, and he didn't really mention that he sexually assaulted them in his story, but they found proof, you know, of pubic hair and such, right? So
yeah,
it's this. I was like, come on guys, how could? And then Kristiansand was like, I'm not even part of this whole thing. And
he tried to exclude himself,
exactly,
as if he was a victim himself.
And they kind of made him take the whole thing. So Anderson was basically putting the blame on him so that he could share, so he wouldn't have the whole sentence on him.
Which I think in the long run, it only benefited him that he got
lesser time because of
he only got lesser time by 1 year, but he was able to. I'm pretty sure he pleaded, and he got parole. So that's why instead of him staying the whole thing, yeah, like the full, like, you know, till, because technically that was 2000, so he would have been in there till 2021 during the pandemic, or 2022, one of those two. And he was out 2015, so out of the 21 years, he only served 15 of them. So he was able to probably plead out, and that's the reason why he, you know, he admitted to what he did, but made it seem like I had no choice. I did 50-50,
and basically, he forced me to do it. I think that he mostly did majority of the thing and was also very compliant to do those things. I also do believe that Kristiansand was part of it in a way that they discussed details how they're going to do it. But I don't know how serious they were in discussing that. Maybe Anderson was serious, but Kristiansand wasn't. However, I feel like Kristiansand was probably the one not doing a lot of the work. Like, I feel like he's telling the story, Anderson is telling the story from Kristiansand's side.
Yeah, basically trying to paint himself as a lesser person. So Kristiansand wasn't
the one
doing
doing everything, yeah. Like, I feel like Kristiansand was part of it, but he didn't really sexually assault them. That's what I believe.
Unfortunately,
and he took
unfortunately, to get them both, they had to. They basically took his plea because they wanted to get them both. Yeah. So it's,
and they also believe that there were two people involved in this. Some said it was one, but they did believe that there were two people, because it is hard to kidnap two children as one person
and keep both under control, unless, like, you know, you have ropes and tying them up involved, which wasn't the case because it wasn't that far planned. But one thing I can say though is it makes sense on the reason why they probably went through with the plan or thought the plan was gonna be like airtight, was because, remember, they did have a below average IQ. They weren't like, you know, they didn't have like a substantial mental deficit like, you know, someone who was like maybe with like Down syndrome or, you know, other forms of like a mental handicap, but they specifically had
Down
83 and 84
have a mental handicap?
Some of them, it depends. It depends on the severity of the Down syndrome.
Okay, I didn't know that. I thought they were like just look different, but they actually are equally smart and stuff. Okay, I don't know. I didn't know.
So it depends on the Some cases they can look different, and they just might be just. Let's say, like, I hate to describe it like this, but let's say, you know, you have a building of 20 floors, they might be missing only one, and that's like the average person. So yeah, in some cases they are very functional.
However,
they can live
the
life.
Psychiatrists and everyone else evaluated them, that they were aware of what they did. They were also you know, smart enough, I guess, to actually plot this, but they somehow are stupid enough to not realize that, you know, DNA test. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's I feel like
they
were able to do it, you know. So
yeah, they were smart enough to be aware of right and wrong, but they were dumb enough where they did not fully have common sense and think things through, because, like I said, they had a subpar IQ. They were floating just below the radar, which means they were not super bright. Like I said, they didn't have a mental handicap where they couldn't tell right from wrong, but they still were not very bright. So they probably was like, yo, this is a great plan, and little did they know that, oh my god, they can test for this stuff now. Like, how did you find a single hair in a wooded area? I'm like, you have no idea how technology works, because like I said, they were dumb.
Yeah.
They are
And he was like,
below
no,
average.
no. And then he realized, oh, wait, I can't do that, you know. Either way, I think that I'm glad that the police and the detectives and the experts were collaborating and made a super good job with this. I'm so sad that they weren't able to help them in time because they got killed immediately. But, you know, they weren't the brightest, because it wasn't like this was, you know, in the old days where it was new with the DNA tests and such. But it's a shame, especially if they plotted this and they thought about it and talked about it in detail and everything too. Like, how can you stop that? You know, they were like 19, right? Around that age.
Yeah,
so they just
18,
became
19, yeah.
like
adults.
Yeah.
But you know, that's just part 1, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, remember, this is going to be a 2-parter because the amount of information that was online about the Baneheia murders was extensive. There was even the second half is more related to the trial itself and kind of the back and forth of how did they mentally function, how did that involve the crime, how did that involve their participation. So they had a lot of details. Even then, the 2-parter is not the total information that is available about this. So even if you listen to the podcast, I would encourage you, go look it up, read it. There's plenty of sources for it. I'll probably list a couple in the description, or maybe I'll put them in the links in the link tree for the episode. But the case in general is just very extensive and very juicy. So a lot of the information about who they were and why they did what they did kind of comes out during the trial, which happened a year later, which, if you recall any of the other podcast episodes, that's kind of quick, actually. Remember, they were murdered and sexually assaulted in 2000, and they were arrested pretty shortly after, which means they were waiting for their arraignment probably for like a couple months. So they were already in custody in 2000, and their official trial was 2001. So everything's kind of moving kind of fast.
Yeah,
so they kind of progressing fast.
Maybe
so
that's why.
Yep, that's exactly what happened. They got on it and they got him. So next episode we'll get into the trial, some of the details of the trial, and you know, just all the juicy, succulent, and yet disappointing stuff for the next episode. So stick around, you know, be sure to look out for that next week, and we shall see you then.
Yeah. Oh, I just want to say also, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Yes, I wanted to say that.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yes, we did make our return. To say that too. And I did mention it earlier in the episode, but I did. just in case, you know, just I hope the New Year's. I hope your year
pray to God
is safe, comfortable. I hope you have many opportunities come to you, and I hope this year changes your life in a good way.
Yes.
I hope your family prospers. I hope the whole economy crashes to make everything cheap.
Yes.
I hope, you know, I hope the prices of cars crash. I hope the prices of food crash. I hope everything becomes affordable for you and your family.
Yes.
I'm speaking that into existence for all of you.
Yes. And like also, you know, cheaper food. Because I like that. Did you say that? I can't remember. I have a brain of a goldfish right now. Okay. But I like cheaper food. I want to eat, like, you know, I haven't eaten sushi for a long time. I've been craving that for like forever, but everything is so damn expensive right now. Okay, that's my struggle. Anyways, I will see you I will see you guys on the second episode.
So bye guys.
Bye.